Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the Baileywiki channel, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. We also make modular systems and scenes that you can use without any setup for FoundryVTT. And those are going to be the backdrop for today's video covering our Nuts and Bolts module. As the name suggests, our free Nuts and Bolts module is key to a lot of the functionality in our premium modules and in our free Maps module. But it also has a lot of different utility pieces that you can use with or without our maps. So we wanted to take the opportunity to showcase the module and give an overview of all of the content within it. We'll go over where all of the content is stored and what you can do with all of it, and then also dive a little bit deeper in some of our favorite utility pieces that we use all of the time when creating our scenes. As always, you can skip ahead using the timestamps in the description to check out the most relevant sections or review different pieces that we showcase. Now, with all of that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. To get started with Nuts and Bolts, you'll find the vast majority of the content in your Compendiums directory. Inside of the Compendiums directory, there is a Baileywiki content folder that will be automatically generated for you when you install the Nuts and Bolts module. And within that, you'll find a few different folders. Nuts and Bolts is going to create the prefabs, utility pieces, and scenes-free folders for you. You may also have a separate scenes folder for scenes from our premium maps as well, but these are the three that are included with Nuts and Bolts. Inside of prefabs, we have the actual compendium for the mass edit presets. You'll usually check those out through the mass edit presets browser. Then we have our utility pieces, which is the bulk of the pieces for Nuts and Bolts. And then finally, we have the scenes-free folder with the Baileywiki Nuts and Bolts scenes directory in there. So we're first going to focus on the utility pieces here. Within this, you'll find some different pieces that are meant for making our maps work and giving you a little bit more information about them. The items folder is for 5e only, and these are just little generic items that are used for some of our Monk's active tile triggers in puzzles. Then we have the journal entries, and in here you'll have some more information about the different maps and everything, and also the different modules. So we have this About Nuts and Bolts, and you'll see a similar format for the rest of our maps. And if you ever want to take a look at what is the latest and greatest updates to the Baileywiki family of modules, the What's New entry also has a link to our changelog and our modular release videos playlist. Then the real meat and potatoes of Nuts and Bolts is going to be the macros, and these truly are the nuts and bolts of the Baileywiki family of modules. This is a collection of macros that are used for utility reasons and also are referenced by some of our other scenes. So within this, you'll always find the new folder, which has things that we have added, such as some random overlays and this BWFX all TMFX filters macro that we'll demonstrate here in a moment. And then we also have things categorized by their function. So for building scenes, you'll find some different useful macros here for adjusting things, whether that be with token attacher or otherwise. For making things work, you generally don't need to use these at all. These are all going to be referenced by our Monk's active tile triggers or other setups that are going to be referencing to these. Feel free to take a look at some of our maps and scenes that utilize these though, and figure out how you can use them for your own maps and designs. Levels presets are pretty self-explanatory. These will set the levels value for a scene to match the appropriate levels for these different ships and presets that we have available in our map library. Next, our Macrowheel folder has a variety of token magic effects filters in it, already nicely organized by folders. If you open up the free overlays, all of these are included directly in Nuts and Bolts. There are also free overlays inside of the subfolders, but they're all nice and here in one place for you if you're only using Nuts and Bolts or our free modules. If you have access to the Patreon modules, you'll also have access to all the additional overlays. These token magic effects overlays are fantastic, and we use them all the time for modifying scenes and adding a little extra pizzazz to them. So you can import the overlays to your macro directory or your hotbar, and then when you use them, you'll apply different effects onto the objects. And there are a whole variety of these that we'll go over in more detail here shortly. There's a variety of folders in here. Just generally speaking, if it says free, then you're good to go on all of the overlay pieces. And then if you're using Ripper's Macrowheel module, the name for the folder is very apt here. It is so that you can immediately drag it into your macros directory and have all of our token magic effects filters. And then when you use your hotkey for the macro bar, then you'll have all of the different overlay folders ready for you to use. Outside of our Macrowheel folder, we have a couple other remaining folders. We have TMFX overlay effects that are some additional token magic effects. All of these are completely free. There are no actual assets required for these, so they are able to be used with any module setup. Then we have the token magic effects folder that is some more specific ones that you wouldn't necessarily want to put on your macro wheel. A lot of these are also going to be, say, targeted or specific utility pieces. For example, everything that says MATT-targeted is going to be a macro that applies a token magic effects filter using Monk's active tile triggers on a specific tile using a tag. So those cannot be operated from your hotbar. Instead, you need to fire them from a Monk's active tile trigger, and you can see how we do that on several of our scenes if you're interested in setting that up yourself. In addition to the targeted and utility pieces in here, there's also a few that just make a little bit more sense to have as a macro bar or macro directory type token magic effect, because it's not going to be used as often as a lot of our more environmental overlay macros. And so an example of that is going to be this floating books effect that adds a really neat effect, but you're unlikely to use this all of the time. So we have it in the separate token magic effects folder. Within this folder, the random maps for landing pages will require the landing pages module, and then the floating objects here are going to require our premium modules. Everything else is going to be free. That's either going to be using token magic effects as built-in pieces, or it will specify, for example, Jinker's animated objects here for that module to be able to use the assets from. So there's a variety of different, more utility-oriented token magic effects filters in here, and a lot of those targeted ones. Our final folder is going to be the utilities folder. This has a variety of different utility pieces, whether that's for migrating data between major Foundry or module versions, or some other just general utility pieces. Some of these also are used in our other scenes as well. Within this, you'll also find a variety of different weather effects for FX Master. So if you want to apply the weather with the exact same settings that we use, you can execute those macros, and over time, the scene will transition to the appropriate weather settings. If you're ever unsure about what one of these utility pieces does, you can usually click on the macro, make sure it's not on your bar or that will execute it. But then when you open it up, most of them will have this commented section up at the top that tells you a little bit about what's going on. So check that before you use one of the utility macros, unless you've been instructed to otherwise, either in one of our videos or in our Discord where we're helping people out. That does it for the overview of the macros compendium here. Now we're going to show off just a few examples of our overlays and those features, and then we're going to dive into a few of the macros that we think are really worth knowing about and taking advantage of, whether you have our premium modules or not. So on screen, you're seeing a variety of the different TMFX overlays that are in the Macrowheel folder. These are, again, primarily going to be overlays. They're applying basically decals on top of things. And this is a really great way to add some extra ambiance, such as the ropes or the vines or some damage overlays that can really change things up on your individual assets. We also have some more advanced TMFX filters that will actually completely change the appearance of a tile. And you're seeing that right now with our terrain spawner. And this is an example of something leveraging Monk's active tile triggers to execute a TMFX filter. Out of the macros that we want to show off, the first and probably most important one to know about is this Baileywiki all TMFX filters macro. When you execute this macro, you get this really nice little dialog that is going to open up a browser for all of the token magic effects in your TMFX library. When you first load up Nuts and Bolts, it will ask you to import all of the Baileywiki token magic effects into your library, which allows it to be accessed here. This also means that everything from the token magic effects module's library and anything from other modules that add token magic effects to your library is going to populate this. You can simply click on any of the macros and it will turn it on, and then you can click on it again to turn it off. So they will toggle. There are some that are going to be multiple applications, so you'll have to experiment a little bit with that. If, for whatever reason, you want to get rid of all of the token magic effects filters on a given object, for example, if there's a bunch of different splatter effects that are multiple executed and you can't really go back one, you can simply click on this button up here, which is going to remove all of the token magic effects filters from an object. So this is where you can find a variety of different overlays all in one place instead of having to navigate through either Macrowheel or through your macros directory. So this is the main way that we would suggest you use the token magic effects filters that we have provided. Within that, then, you'll notice that we are looking at a red wagon. If you are familiar with the Dungeondraft application for map making, you may be familiar with the concept of having colorable assets in it that start with a red tint that then the red changes to whatever other color you would like. Well, we have a token magic effects filter that does just that. So notice that when I fire up this Dungeondraft tint, it's going to give me a hex code here and a bar. So you can click on the bar to open up a color picker, and that is going to vary based upon the browser that you're using. And then you can select a brand new color. And you'll notice that once you've selected it, it is going to apply that color to the object. Once you hit set, it will become permanent. And then if you use the filter again, you'll notice that the same hex code is there. You can also change the color by changing the hex code here. So that is a very powerful tool for being able to use just one or two assets and be able to create a bunch of different versions of them rather than having to have a different tile for every single color combination that you want. And we use it heavily in a lot of our scenes. I've hopped over to another scene to show off our next batch of macros here. And the first one is going to be this desaturate here. So we search for adjust, we have BW adjust lower saturation. Over here also I want to point out that if you search in BW, you'll be able to see all of our different overlays here. And of course you can search for the actual titles as you want. So with the adjust or lower saturation, you'll notice that this rock now has lost a lot of its color. So if I undo that, you'll see it's a little warmer, and we can click it again to apply that. We also have a specifically snowy adjustment that desaturates it a little differently. But let's say this isn't exactly what you want, and that's going to bring us to our next macro that is incredibly helpful when you are dealing with a variety of TMFX filters. And that's going to be the TMFX edit. So if I go ahead and I reapply the saturation, and then we use TMFX edit, you'll see that we have filters here. And when we click on this, it's going to have all of this information about the parameters that we're using. So for this particular filter, we have things like brightness, contrast, gamma, red, green, blue, and alpha. So for example, if I change the alpha here to 0.5 and hit apply, it's going to become more transparent. I can then adjust this further. Maybe we revert our alpha change, and we do some things like take a little bit of the red out of this asset. And you can continue this process to further refine the different filters you have. If you have multiple filters applied, then you'll notice that we have both appear here. So we can make some further adjustments on how all of this works. Increasing brightness. And we can make adjustments to this particular overlay if we want to change the rotation of it, etc. And if we no longer want one of these overlays, we can simply right-click on it to delete that filter from this. And you'll see that over here, I have used the adjust saturation, and then I have further adjusted it using the TMFX edit macro here. And so I've messed around and I've really lowered the saturation and increased the brightness and contrast and gamma so that it looks much closer to the snow color that the rest of this scene has. You can then combine this with additional filters such as the frost overlay or an ice overlay or some snow overlays, and it works a little bit better on that versus one that does not have any particular filters set on it. So you can use the adjust and the desaturate macros to really fine tune individual assets so that you don't have to have a bunch of different copies of tiles, and you can save on a lot of space that way. So it's a really cool trick to be able to get a lot more mileage out of the different assets that you have, whether those are your own that you have brought in or from modules. Over on a blank scene, we're going to check out another really great feature of the Nuts and Bolts module, and that's going to be some mass edit presets. Within your mass edit preset browser, you can check all of the placeables, etc. And then if you look inside of the Baileywiki folder, there's going to be the Nuts and Bolts prefabs folder. There are a variety of really great presets in here for lighting if you want to match the exact lighting styles that we use, such as our fire techniques, or also some things that are already set up for you to have the correct radii, correct color, and also have darkness activation ranges, etc. And this can make things a lot easier for you and a lot faster for setting up a scene, especially if you want to keep parity across a variety of scenes. There are further presets for things such as audio and special walls, such as doors and light blockers and windows, and some specific ambiance sound files as well. And if you're using the Monk's Active Tile Triggers module, there are a lot of great presets for that as well. The Spawn Active Tile is going to give you a field that you can adjust to set the width and height of the tile that you're spawning in, and you can also change the texture. By default, this is going to go to a folder in our Premium Towns module that is filled with a variety of these really helpful icons for Monk's Active Tile Triggers. This is also included in our free module. It's a slightly smaller selection, but you still have a lot of these great options in there should you so choose. Whenever you're happy with the pieces, you hit apply, and then you'll notice that we have the great preview for mass edit that allows us to spawn in this tile. It's just helpful that it automatically sizes to a grid unit and picks out an appropriate tile for you from the file browser rather than you having to go into the tile browser, find that, and then drag it out. There's also a really helpful MATT reference tile that we have a whole video about that you can double click for some info as long as you're on your token settings, and it will tell you about the tile. And within the tile, you can see we have a really nice organized set of example sections that you can then bring over to your other tiles. Again, we've got a full video on that, so check that out if you're interested in learning more about the MATT reference tile. And the final feature of Nuts and Bolts are some free scenes showing off some different capabilities here. If you've seen our other videos with Mass Edit's latest Scenescapes feature, it's very similar to the vistas in Ember that the Foundry team has put together, but it's available system agnostic and right now. There are a few different quirks to how to use it and the types of assets that you need, but we have some of those available for you if you want to give it a try. Within your companions directory, there's the scenes-free folder inside of the Baileywiki content folder, and in that you'll find the Nuts and Bolts Scenes Compendium. And there are 2 scenescapes for you to peruse. We have the camp here, and then we also have the village. These sample scenes have a variety of assets and tokens already on them, and we have them already set up with the Mass Edit Scenescapes configuration to have proper size scaling. So you can see as we move this rogue Thael around here, that she is dynamically resizing based on her position within the scene. One important note when you're using these is that you will want to make sure that you have a represented actor for the tokens. Otherwise, the scaling doesn't work quite right. So just make sure you set that up whenever you are messing with a scenescape. In addition to the free versions that we have here, we also have some assets available for you as well. So this background here can be found within the module files. So these are inside of the Baileywiki Nuts and Bolts Assets folder. And then inside of the Scenescape demos, you can see backdrops, etc. And you can select from some exteriors and some interiors as you so desire. Within the Mass Edit preset browser, there is also a folder for Scenescapes. So we have the free props that are available as tiles and as characters. And for the tiles, you can see things like the tree. You'll notice that this dynamically resizes as well. Because tiles are a little strange, you may want to hit Shift-Z, and that is the default key binding for Mass Edit to stop the dynamic scaling as you're moving things around with Scenescapes. So for some of the tiles and the way sizing works in general, you may want to change it just a little bit when you initially place something. And you can still scale this up manually with Alt as per usual. So if we want to add in this tree, and we want to be a specific size, then we can do so. There's a variety of these different pieces available to you for setting up your own Scenescapes and experimenting with that if you're wanting to give that a try. That's going to conclude our overview and showcase of the Baileywiki Nuts and Bolts module. Once again, the Nuts and Bolts module is completely free and available to you whether you use our maps or not. We hope that this has shown that the Nuts and Bolts module is not just some gears that support the rest of our modules, but is truly a utility package in its own right. In the comments, let us know if you still have questions about things in the Nuts and Bolts module, or if there are any additional macros or features that you'd like to see added to it. We'd also love to know what the most exciting part of the Nuts and Bolts module is to you. Is it the great utility macros? Is it the free Scenescapes or something else? Let us know in the comments down below. Once again, this has been Zephyr for the Baileywiki channel. If you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content and hit the bell to make sure you never miss a video. Also consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, but you also gain access to all of the modular systems and scenes that we make for FoundryVTT. And while the Nuts and Bolts module does not require the premium modules, there are a whole lot of fantastic token magic effects filters available to you if you are a member of the Patreon. Once again, it's been Zephyr. Thank you so much for watching, happy gaming, and have a good one.